Oh hey, greetings deep divers, it's Maddie from madeupbymaddie.com, bringing you the very first episode of The Dive. This project has been so much fun. I hold it very near and dear to my heart. It's taken about a year to get to this point, watching new movies, listening to a different album every single day, staying current on past pop culture. It's been a total immersive experience and I'm so excited to share it with you. Today, we're kicking it off with the year that started it all, 1960. And for the makeup, I will be creating a look inspired by none other than Etta James. Without further ado, let's jump in. And now for the headlines of 1960. On February 1st, 1960, what is referred to as the Greensboro sit-ins took place at a North Carolina department store lunch counter. Kicked off by 4 black university students to protest segregation, it lasted almost 6 months and not only resulted in the store's change of policy, eliminating unfair segregation of its black customers, but also kicked off other nonviolent protests all over the South. After 20 years of marriage and many years in show business, Lucille Ball divorces Desi Arnaz on March 4, 1960. Although the relationship was said to be very tumultuous towards the end, Lucy and Desi remained friends until their dying days. On May 9, 1960, the Food and Drug Administration approves the world's first commercially marketed birth control pill called Enovid. And after a close race, John F. Kennedy becomes president-elect on November 8, 1960. Beating Richard Nixon with only 113,000 of the reported popular vote. Now, I'll be sharing the 7 albums I listened to during my week in 1960. Alright, kicking off this challenge, I listened to At Last by Etta James on Sunday. This is a pleasant, upbeat listen. Etta James's debut album just is so soulful. It takes her listeners on a beautiful journey. It only has 10 tracks, but it's still sure to pack in all the punch you need. My favorites are At Last, Anything to Say You're Mine, and A Sunday Kind of Love. This album was so cool. It had so many different moments. It was just really nice to listen to. I remember I was at the gym when I listened to it, and this is the first day of my challenge, so I'm used to listening to different music when I work out, and this did not disappoint. I love this album through and through. It's the only Etta James album I've listened through all the way. It's definitely inspired me to get more into Etta James. I am in love with this album. A+. On Monday, I listened to Charles Mingus's Blues and Roots. It's so hard to believe that this one was recorded just in one day, in March of 1960. So, hearing the criticism that his previous work didn't swing, Mingus just wanted to prove his critics wrong. He came to the studio, busted out this masterpiece, and it just transcends so many styles, and he only does so in 6 tracks. My favorites are Moanin', Wednesday Night Prayer Meeting, and Cryin' Blues. Alright, Tuesday, Joan Baez's debut album entitled Joan Baez. So this one is just so masterfully delivered. It's quality folk. Some might say that she had the odds stacked against her favor, only being 19 at the time of recording, but she was on the scene for a little bit before recording this in the studio, which only took her 4 nights to record. My favorites are Silver Dagger, Fare Thee Well, Mary Hamilton, and El Preso Número 9. Wednesday brought me His Hand in Mine by Elvis Presley. This was Presley's manager's attempt to market a more family-friendly Elvis to the masses. Elvis was focusing on his budding movie career at the time. A lot of the songs featured on this record are more spiritual or gospel standards. They're a little hard to relate to if you've never heard them before. It is beautifully rendered, but I did want to listen to another Elvis album to get a more well-rounded feel. My favorite off this one is Milky White Way. Okay, hear me out. So I know this is a challenge to listen to different music. I feel like I settled on an album from Elvis, and it was kind of just something I took at random. I admit it. I did a repeat. And honestly, I'm really glad I did, because if I would have just taken that as Elvis, I wanted a different side. Okay, so on Thursday, I listened to Elvis Is Back by Elvis Presley. This one was a little more upbeat than the last one I listened to. This was actually his first record out of 3 released in 1960, and it was recorded right after he was honorably discharged from the Army after being drafted in 1958. This just proves he was on fire. 3 albums in 1 year, had a lot of great moments on it. My favorites are Fever and Dirty Dirty Feeling. So on Friday, I listened to Nice and Easy by Frank Sinatra, and what a masterpiece. The musical arrangements paired with Sinatra's smooth, honeyed voice really gives this record a serene and comforting feeling. It just puts you in mind of what Sinatra is famous for. It was actually nominated for 3 Grammys that year, one being Album of the Year, not surprisingly. My favorites are You Go to My Head and the title track, Nice and Easy. And closing out the week on Saturday, I listened to A Date with the Everly Brothers by the Everly Brothers. This one was released in October of 1960, and it was actually the Kentucky-born brothers' second album on their new label, Warner Brothers. When speaking of the hit Kathy's Clown, Don Everly once stated that it was written from a recollection of a childhood sweetheart of his and his currently unhappy marriage. So that was really interesting. My favorites are Baby What You Want Me to Do, Lucille, and Kathy's Clown. The first movie on my journey was Eyes Without a Face. It's a 1960 thriller that doesn't really use music to inform the way you're about to feel, so it's really unique in that way. It's actually a French film. I believe I watched in subtitles, but it was so long ago. I watched it at the beginning of the year, so I don't really remember. I mean, obviously I understood it, so I'm pretty sure it has subtitles. But anyway, there's a lot of realism to the scenes, a lot of silence used to create that suspense, which is really unique, at least compared to movies that I've seen in the last 20 or 30 years. It's not a movie that's really going to woo you with blood, guts, and effects. It's definitely a classic, and I want to say Criterion released it as well, so it kind of has that badge of honor of being worthy. So next up on the list is Village of the Damned. I know this movie had a remake in the 90s. I didn't see that one either, but I saw this one, and it has a great premise. Don't get me wrong. It's really cool. I think that's probably why it prompted the remake, which I heard wasn't that good either. I like the premise. It was a little boring for me. It was a movie that I definitely, I fell asleep to, which is not very uncommon for me. Yeah, it was okay. I probably wouldn't watch it again, although I would give the remake a try. And finally, The Apartment. This movie stars a very young Shirley MacLaine and Jack Lemmon. They are such a dynamic duo. They work really well. The story itself is very unlikely, like the premise, I guess, but it doesn't matter. It's a feel-good movie. It's a really cute love story, and I was pleasantly surprised with it. The acting is great. I want to say it was like closer to the 2-hour mark, which I found was very common in the 1960s. Most everything was 2 hours or even longer sometimes. Again, it didn't matter because it was so entertaining, and I really enjoyed it.
It's time for the big splash.
Everything of 1960 was of top quality. I did not want to skip through any song, any album. I was living in the moment. So naturally, it was really hard for me to pick a favorite. I would say my favorite album, track for track. It was tough. It's gonna be a toss-up between Etta James and Joan Baez, but I'm gonna have to say I was more blown away by Joan Baez, just because it's her, it's a guitar, it's Silver Dagger. That song, I remember I was cleaning when I heard that song, and I was just like, whoa, what is this? And I restarted it. So it took me a while to get through the album because I think I played that song like 2 or 3 times. But then as more songs kept progressing, I had to repeat them as well, which is something on this challenge is kind of rare for me. That was her first album. She was a kid when she made it. I know what I was doing when I was 19, and I wasn't writing amazing folk songs and going around the world with Bob Dylan. That album was fantastic. I think that's definitely the winner. So big splash to Joan Baez, her debut album. For a film, hands down, no-brainer, The Apartment. That movie was so much fun. Like I said, it was so much fun to watch. The acting, it was cute. It was very much of its time. I loved that movie, and I would definitely recommend it. And I will probably watch that movie again. 2 thumbs up.
It's the look.
For this Etta James look, what I wanted to accomplish was hit a few bullet points that were kind of all across the board Etta James. One being thick eyebrow, like really angular, but really thick in the beginning of the, like closer to the bridge of the nose. I wanted to have color, but I didn't want it to be too much because that's not what she really wore. Even in pictures I'm seeing of Etta James through the 70s, it seems like she wasn't a bold lip type of gal. So that was another thing. I wanted to keep the foundation really flat. It looks very uncontoured in her pictures. To her credit, a beauty. Didn't need it. And another thing was her hair. I made sure that it was a little bit bigger because why not? I got the color. I just kind of went a little more bumped. But I think it really brought the look together. I'm really happy with it. I think it was pretty spot on, especially to some of the pictures of Etta James in the recording studio. It's almost like doppelganger status. So I really like this one a lot. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end. If you want, you can always check out my website, madeupbymaddie.com, where you can see my blog, view my portfolio. My site is available in English and in Spanish, and of course you can contact me or book me, as I am a worldwide makeup artist and I would love to be a part of your world. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again next time.